Hey guys, Greg Chaplin here, physical therapist and strength and conditioning specialist. And in this video, we're going to be talking all about pooch belly. Yes, that lower part of the abdomen that seems to stick out and is resistant to diet and exercise. Well, we're going to be revealing why that is in this video and go through a simple exercise progression of just 2 exercises that you can use today to get real-time results. Then if you're still with me by the end of that, we're going to go into some of the nuances at the end of the video in terms of the mindset around these postural corrections, as well as some of the common mistakes. So if any or all of that sounds good to you, then let's go ahead and jump right in. So when most people talk about pooch belly, they describe it as a problem related to body fat. And in some cases, this could be true. So if genetically you're predisposed to having a little bit more fat deposit in the lower abdomen, then yes, it might be related to diet and exercise. But for many people, you can be pretty lean and still have this lower part of the abdomen that is sticking out relative to that upper part of the abdomen. And that's really what pooch belly is. And in many cases, if not most cases, pooch belly is actually more of a postural issue. Now, to understand how this works, we need to understand a little bit of what the abdominal cavity is made of. And we'll just briefly go into that so we can illustrate what this real root cause is. And then from there, we'll get into the exercises. Now to help us visualize the abdominal cavity, we've got my buddy here, Mr. Phibbs. So if we think about the abdominal cavity, it's really all the way from this lower rib cage down through the bottom of the pelvic floor. So the pelvic floor is like literally the floor of the abdominal cavity. That diaphragm is the ceiling. And then the abdomen wraps around almost all the way from the back, all the way around the front. And that's like the wall of the abdominal cavity, right? Abdominal wall. Cool, got it? Now, in between that, we've got all fluid-filled elements. Now, specifically, if we use this squeezy toy to represent this fluid, thinking about the floor being here, the diaphragm being here, the abs wrapping around, then the back way back here, what we can think of is that if we squeeze the top of this, imagine that being ab contraction, we start to get that fluid flowing down. If then we contract our diaphragm and pull it down, by taking a breath in or holding it in too much of an inhaled position, then we can further pooch that belly down. Now, if you imagine this is the front of the abdomen and this is the back, if we then arch our back forward in space and come forward, we're going to get that exaggerated pooch here in the bottom. And this is really exactly what is going on with a pooch belly. We've got too much tension in the upper abs. We've got too much activity in the diaphragm, it's pulling down low. Those things together are squeezing the fluid elements down. And then from there, as we shift forward in space, we get the abdomen being distended a little bit forward and down, only in that lower part as a result of the downward pressure plus that change in the center of gravity. And to just show you how easy this is to either make happen or make not happen, I'm gonna actually just show you this in real time, right? So if I'm here and I wanna get my lower abdomen to pooch, we can go through those steps. So we're gonna squeeze up here in the upper abs. We can either do that by kind of like slumping down like this a little bit, or we could just exhale and pull those ribs together. Okay, right now you'll see not a lot of pooch yet. But then if I take a breath in and I get the abdomen to push down, now I'm starting to feel a downward pressure. If I then shift forward and I let that come forward, now we can start to see a pooch, right? And if I even more tighten up these upper ribs and bring them together, as I allow this lower pooch to come out, you're really gonna start to see a little bit more of an exaggerated pooch. So what we need to do to be able to reverse this is to simply increase the activity in the lower abs and pelvic floor to pull the guts up and back. We need to shift back in space to allow that. And then we have to expand this lower rib cage so that it doesn't have that compression of the abs. And then we need to relax the diaphragm so it doesn't have as much downward push. And we'll see here, I've exhaled, relaxed my diaphragm. I've reduced the tension here in the upper abs. I've pulled that pelvic floor up and in, as well as pulled the lower abs up and in. And now we no longer have that pooch belly. So in these 2 exercises, we're going to sequentially work on first relaxing this lower rib cage and diaphragm, and then getting up into an upright position and working on the center of gravity plus the activation of those lower abs and pelvic floor. So let's go ahead and jump right in. All right, so this first activity is going to be a prone activity with a little bit of inversion. So if you want, you could actually put something below the knees to lift your butt up a little bit higher. But the idea here is that because the head is below the hips, we're gonna have a little bit of a downward gradient so that the guts can flow from the pelvic floor up towards that diaphragm. That's gonna make it a little bit easier to relax the diaphragm on exhalation. So once we're in this position, what we wanna do is we wanna think about that relationship that we talked about a second. So when we do our exhales, we're gonna wanna pull the lower abs up a little bit. We're also gonna think about lifting the pelvic floor up towards the diaphragm. And then after that, we're gonna take our breath in through the nose, and we're gonna try to maintain a little bit of that lower abdominal tension, but allow that lower rib cage to expand. So inhale, maintain lower ab tension. And that's gonna move those guts upward towards the diaphragm. Now we're gonna exhale to relax the diaphragm. Continue to pull up those lower abs. And then we can repeat. Exhale, pull the lower abs up, relax the diaphragm. Inhale, relax the lower rib cage, get some expansion there without letting go of the lower abs. And then we can repeat that once again. Exhale, pulling pelvic floor and diaphragm. Exhale, pulling pelvic floor and lower abs up. Inhale, maintaining that tension while allowing that lower rib cage to expand. And then repeat. Now in this last activity, we should have already been able to relax the diaphragm as well as those superficial upper abs. So we no longer have as much of that downward pressure. And now all we have to do is negotiate the center of gravity coming a little bit further back, as well as activation of those deep abs and pelvic floor muscles. Okay, so to start this activity, we're first just gonna shift forward and back to get a sense of our position in space. We really wanna allow the body to just naturally and easily move towards the front and then towards the back to just loosen everything up a little bit. And then we're gonna find a center point where we have good contact in the front, middle, and back of the foot. And then from here, we're gonna start with a nice, long, gentle exhale. Now, as we do this, we're consciously thinking about those guts, and we're thinking about pulling those guts up and back. This is a subtle kind of a movement, and it's gonna be mainly deep abs coming in and pelvic floor tucking up. So you shouldn't see a big obvious tilting of the pelvis. If you're doing that, you're overdoing it. What it should be is instead a very subtle change in the feeling of activation here in the lower abs and pelvic floor. So you can think about if you're a guy pulling your balls up or retracting the head of your penis. If you're a lady, you can think about a similar cue that might work for you, but the idea is to pull up and in. So we're gonna do that on a gentle exhale. And you can see that my lower abs start to come in, but if we look here at that lower part of the rib cage, I'm not squeezing those lower ribs together. I'm actually keeping them a little bit more open. So if from here I was going to take a breath in through my nose, we wouldn't see that this actually expands out, but instead we'd see more distributed expansion through this entire lower rib cage as well as a little bit of the upper abdomen, more so than the lower abdomen. So now we're gonna do that. We're gonna take a nice easy inhale, keeping a little bit of that tension here in the lower abs and pelvic floor. Should feel more expansion in the ribs and maybe a little bit in the upper abdomen. Then we're gonna repeat, relaxing with a long, gentle exhale. Thinking about pulling up, back, and in. Then once again with our inhale, maintaining a little bit of that contraction here down low, but letting a little bit more expansion happen here up top. and not just on the front, but in a 360-degree kind of a fashion. Pulling up and in, then breathing in, feeling expansion at the lower rib cage and upper abdomen. If you're getting value from this video so far, consider liking this video or leave any questions you have down below in the comments. If you haven't already, subscribe to the channel and make sure to hit the notification bell so you'll know when I upload a new video. All right, so now that we've gone through the exercises, let's talk about the common mistakes. So you'll notice that when we did that standing exercise, as well as that first exercise, we did a nice gentle exhale. And one of the reasons for that is that the superficial abdominals that attach here up on this lower part of the rib cage, if they're overactive, they're gonna squeeze that upper rib cage and contribute to that downward force. So we wanna minimize that. And to minimize that, we're gonna do that gentle exhale. If we do a more resisted exhale, like through pursed lips or using a balloon or just trying too hard, we're gonna be more likely to engage those superficial abs, and then that's gonna actually get in the way of our goals. So we wanna have that gentle exhale to be able to get lower abs and deeper abs to come in, but not those superficial abs. Now the second mistake, which we already alluded to, is overdoing the positional change. And the reason we started just kind of going back and forth is to let the body start to naturally respond to these changes in position. But then from there, we want to make sure we're not over tucking the pelvis. Because if we do this, we're going to engage that rectus abdominis a little bit more than we want. That's a very superficial abdominal. And that's going to contribute to a squeezing of that abdominal cavity that's more just front to back and not circumferential and all around. We're really trying to target just the lowermost part of the abs, and we want that full 360-degree kind of compression that can take everything and tuck it together, which then allows the pelvic floor to pull it up. So if you're over tucking your pelvis or over tightening those center abdominals, you're probably not doing it correctly. Now, kind of last but not least, and this is more on a philosophical mindset level, we want to make sure that when we do this, we don't assume that this is the right way and that the other is the wrong way. Let's be real for a second. A lot of the reason we want that pooch belly to go away is because we don't like the way it looks. And that's fine. From my perspective, if we have a pooch belly, but we can correct it, then that's great. But we don't want to get into a scenario where we're forcing ourselves to maintain this position all the time and then lose the ability to pooch. Having the ability to pooch is basically a sign that you can relax those lower abs and pelvic floor, which is good. From a movement perspective, you want to be able to do both. Now, a lot of times when we're looking at other people and they seem to have this pulled in abdomen, we think, oh my God, that looks better. I want to be like that. But in many cases, they're just posing in a picture and they actually do have a pooch at other times, or they're holding themselves in consciously, or maybe at this point they've trained themselves to do it and it's unconsciously, but that can have negative secondary consequences from a movement perspective. And one of those negative secondary consequences is increased pressure throughout the entire abdominal cavity 24/7. And this increased tension and pressure can actually contribute to an overall increase in the perception of stress in your day-to-day life. This is not something you necessarily want to encourage. So if you're sitting at your desk and no one's looking at you and you're doing your work, it's probably better to be able to just let it all hang out and relax. And then if you need to, whether it's for a movement related reason or if it's for some other reason, more aesthetically, to kind of pull that pooch in, then go for it. But don't make the mistake of overcorrecting here, because on a deeper level, what you're telling your body is that the way it is trying to negotiate gravity is wrong or bad. And if the relationship that you have with your body is that you're telling it unconsciously that it's wrong or bad all day long, you're going to tend to get very disconnected. And then when you need to be able to tap into the body, to be able to relax or to be able to move in the way you want, you might not be able to. So we want to be very careful with this project and make sure that we're doing it through the lens of improving movement options and having an option to look or move differently rather than making this a good versus bad. All right, there's so much more that we could say here, but let's leave it there for this video. If you want to learn more about this and other posture and breathing related issues, go ahead and sign up for the waitlist for Total Body Restoration. I hope to see you there, and until next time, peace.